Hey, friends. So, I'm having one of those moments when moments, a couple days probably, but when I've really felt like my focus has been on parenting, which if you have ever had a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, you know that that's kind of what you always focus on. But there's a way in which my reflection has also been steered that direction. And, I'm experiencing this phenomenon, and it ties in so profoundly with my own journey, my own kind of being where I am right now, working with what's happening in me, happening to me, happening through me. Parenting, our children, my child, always seems to be sort of right there in terms of offering a reflection, shedding some light on my journey. Meanwhile, she's also got her own whole thing going on. But we were chatting this morning. I think I've mentioned I did a post 3 or 4 days ago maybe, and I spoke about how we've been going through a phase where there's been a bit of resistance in the equation in any number of different ways. And I feel this sort of most palpably in our work in music, right? Because Annalise is studying violin and I work with her daily on that. And of course, as a musician, I have this cherished, this kind of, it's so important to me that I share music with my daughter. It's such a great gift in my life. And I value it so much. I enjoy the time so much. You left to my own devices, if she were willing, I would literally work with her all day on music. It's just almost nothing that gives me as much joy as watching a little budding musician evolve. And so when she's experiencing resistance to that process, it impacts me, and I have to take a look and go, well, hold on. Is this just resistance because she's also resisting bedtime and waking up in the morning and meal times and going to school and everything else? Is this just, in other words, a phase of her own kind of like boundary testing, relationship to her parents kind of thing? But of course, because I have this investment in her musical development, and of course music is something you can't make someone play an instrument. You can pick them up and put them in the car and take them to school if they don't want to go. You can't make them play the violin. That's not a thing. So there's a certain amount of like coaxing and inducing her own interest, and not to mention you want her to be interested. You want the person to be interested in something like developing a creative craft, because that's ultimately what it's all about. So anyway, when resistance shows up, I have this tendency to question what's happening kind of deeply. I tend to go, oh, am I pushing too much? Like, is this my deep desire to see her become a musician? Like, is that what's really going on here? Or is it just another phase of the ongoing, generalized resistance that a young person just kind of comes in and out of, and which we are most likely at the beginning of, since, I've heard stories about teenagers. But today, we were having a chat. For whatever, we've been pretty good recently about talking things through and really kind of seeing what what we each need, and sort of being in the same space, working together, and kind of working with each other, consciously working with each other. And one of the things that she said today was, well, I watched her practicing something and kind of like wanting it to go faster than it was, right? She's learning a 4-note slur, which is a pretty tricky thing on violin. She's never done that. She's only ever done 2-note slurs. So she's doing this 4-note slur, and she was she did it. She was doing brilliant work, really learning it very quickly. And then she said something about she did something and it wasn't quite perfect, and I saw her kind of get a little deflated. And I was like, honey, what's going on? You just did this brand new thing like really well, not perfectly, but like really well. You should be happy about that. And then but I kind of watched her like feeling the imperfection of it. And I said, oh, sweet pea, you really want things to be kind of perfect the first time, don't you? And she said, yes. And then she said, is that like you? And I was like, yes, guilty. You got me. That's like me. That is exactly how I also have approached so many things in my life, particularly musical practice. And it was both, and then we chatted about it, and we sort of like, I did my best to alleviate that, although this is something that I know we're going to be working with for a while, because I've done everything I can to encourage a kind of gentleness and an approach where we actually celebrate mistakes and like literally verbally talk, like say yay when we make mistakes. I mean, I've tried all kinds of different strategies for letting mistakes be not just okay, but actually interpreting them as a sign of progress, as a sign of discovery. If you have ever heard me talk about piano and my approach to piano study, one of my main things is reframing the notion of mistakes and taking mistakes out of the category of failures and problems and putting them in the category of discoveries and signposts, indicators of where our curiosity can go in order to learn, in order to interpret what that mistake is trying to tell us. In other words, treating a mistake like a message from a benevolent party, telling us something we desperately want to know and that will bring value to us, rather than an indicator that we aren't getting it or that we're failing somehow. I've tried as many different ways as I can to sort of bring that into the spirit of what we do, and yet my daughter still has this thing of having trouble with mistakes. And so then when she asked, is that like you? I was like, oh my God. It is like, I just felt like I had an x-ray machine pointed at my entire psyche. Like, you're just seeing everything, aren't you? Because of course she's getting it from somewhere. Of course that's not just like, I mean, I think there is something in her innate, like she could have just been born this way and been like raised by different parents and still have this attribute. Because I do think that the soul comes in with some tendencies and certain lessons to be learned in life. Maybe a soul with a deeply perfectionistic streak. It's good to come to someone like me who's kind of has wrestled with the same issue and, maybe come up with some ways of reframing that. But I'm also not done in my own journey of that. And it was, both really satisfying to watch her see herself, and then reference this thing that she experiences and kind of see it in me, and understand that there's a relation there between the way I approach work, approach music, and the way she approaches music. But it was also just very joyful to watch her be able to be at least somewhat objective about it, and kind of see that this is a pattern, right? You know, she might still, I mean, she's only 5, so I don't know to what degree she can step outside of herself and sort of say, this isn't me, it's a thing that I'm doing that I can change. You know, of course, that's kind of the work that ultimately we need to do in order to move, but that also has to happen in a kind of age appropriate way. And as your brain develops, as your cognition develops, as your mind develops, there's that different layers of that process become possible, different points in time. But all that is to say, this resistance that's been building for the last couple of weeks really kind of broke through to a new place today. And it reminded me not to get too attached to any particular day, any particular week, any particular phase of what's happening, because it's so easy for me to question myself and to sort of like worry that I'm being the overbearing musician parent, when actually there are just naturally occurring rhythms to everything kind of being totally easy, to everything being a crisis, to everything being easy, to everything being a crisis. That seems to be a part of the learning process in a young developing human, is like, you know, being totally fine with boundaries. Boundaries keep me safe. Testing the boundaries, because the boundaries their boundaries are limiting my freedom. They're curtailing the expansion of my soul. Actually, these boundaries are helpful, and they're giving me structure, and they're giving me the reliability and the centeredness that I need in order to be safe. Now they're starting to impinge on me again, and I kind of want to destroy them and scream and rant and rail. But actually, you get the idea. This getting attached to either one of those, or going or sort of like feeling like things are only okay when they're over here, as opposed to being okay when they're in this other phase of the process, it is just kind of myopic. It's kind of a short-term way of seeing, and it feels good to kind of travel between them periodically, because you start to see that they're just a process. I still need a reminder every once in a while, especially when I'm over here, that like, this is a process. This is not the way it is now, and you need to attack it and fix it until it changes back into the other way. There are things that need to be done when we're in this phase of the process, but they're not categorically different than the things that need to be done when we're in this phase of the process. It's all part of that ongoing development and that ongoing nurturing. And don't give up. Don't not, you know, sometimes it's like, just don't throw up your hands and give up. You know, I sense that there's a tension. When she's over here, there's a kind of tension that I'm required to muster. Not tension like infuse the situation with my will, but a tension in terms of hold the space for this to be okay, even as I'm asserting what I'd like to see, what I feel like is necessary. I'm being the parent. I'm offering, I'm making the rules. I'm saying this is where we need to go. It's not going that way, but this is where I'm leading. Continuing to lead and maintaining a kind of sense of tension with this in a healthy sense, a kind of like, I'm in relationship with this and I'm not dropping it. I'm not throwing up my hands and going away. I'm also not trying to just destroy it and barrel through it. I'm in relationship to it. That feels like the deal. Gotta just be present wherever it is. And then every once in a while she'll show up and she'll just The whole day will be easy, but not every day. Anyway, sometimes, like I said the other day, saying things out loud is the healing process. Speaking, putting language to my experiences is the healing process. So the healing and the growing process. So that's where I'm at today, folks. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.